Joseph Dyer, The Romance of Tristan and Isolde. Part the First, The Childhood of Tristan. My lords, if you would hear a high tale of love and of death, here is that of Tristan and Queen Isolde. How to their full joy, but to their sorrow also, they loved each other, and how at last they died of that love together upon one day, she by him and he by her. Long ago, when Mark was king over Cornwall, Rivalen, king of Lyonesse, heard that Mark's enemies waged war on him. So he crossed the sea to bring him aid, and so faithfully did he serve him with counsel, and swore that Mark gave him his sister Blanchefleur, whom King Rivalen loved most marvelously. He wedded her in Tintagel-Minster, but hardly was she wed when the news came to him that his old enemy Duke Morgan had fallen on Lyonesse and was wasting town and field. Then Rivalen manned his ships in haste, and took Blanchefleur with him to his far land, but she was with child. He landed below his castle of Canol, and gave the queen in ward to his marshal Morholt, and after that set off to wage his war. Blanchefleur waited for him continually, but he did not come home, till she learned upon a day that Duke Morgan had killed him in foul ambush. She did not weep. She made no cry or lamentation, but her limbs failed her and grew weak, and her soul was filled with a strong desire to be rid of the flesh. And though Morholt tried to soothe her, she would not hear. 3 days she awaited reunion with her lord, and on the 4th she brought forth a son. And taking him in her arms, she said, "Little son, I have longed a while to see you, and now I see you the fairest thing ever a woman bore. In sadness came I hither, in sadness did I bring forth, and in sadness has your first feast day gone. And as by sadness you came into the world, your name shall be called Tristan, that is the child of sadness." After she had said these words, she kissed him, and immediately when she had kissed him, she died. Morholt, the keeper of faith, took the child, but already Duke Morgan's men besieged the castle of Canol all round about. There is a wise saying, "Foolhardy was never hardy," and he was compelled to yield to Duke Morgan at his mercy. But for fear that Morgan might slay Rivalen's heir, the marshal hid him among his own sons. When 7 years were past, and the time had come to take the child from the women, Morholt put Tristan under a good master, the squire Gorvenal, and Gorvenal taught him in a few years the arts that go with barony. He taught him the use of lance and sword and scutcheon and bow, and how to cast stone quoits and to leap wide dikes also. And he taught him to hate every lie and felony, and to keep his given word. And he taught him the various kinds of song and harp playing and the hunter's craft. And when the child rode among the young squires, you would have said that he and his horse and his armor were all one thing. To see him so noble and so proud, broad in the shoulders, loyal, strong, and right, all men glorified Morholt in such a son. But Morholt, remembering Rivalen and Blanchefleur, of whose youth and grace all this was a resurrection, loved him indeed as a son, but in his heart revered him as his lord. Now all his joy was snatched from him on a day when certain merchants of Norway, having lured Tristan to their ship, bore him off as a rich prize, though Tristan fought hard, as a young wolf struggles, caught in a gin. But it is a truth well proved, and every sailor knows it, that the sea will hardly bear a felon ship, and gives no aid to rapine. The sea rose and cast a dark storm round the ship and drove it 8 days and 8 nights at random, till the mariners caught through the mist a coast of awful cliffs and seaward rocks, whereon the sea would have ground their hull to pieces. Then they did penance, knowing that the anger of the sea came of the lad, whom they had stolen in an evil hour, and they vowed his deliverance and got ready a boat to put him, if it might be, ashore. Then the wind and sea fell, and the sky shone, and as the Norway ship grew small in the offing, a quiet tide cast Tristan and the boat upon a beach of sand. Painfully he climbed the cliff and saw, beyond, a lonely rolling heath and a forest stretching out and endless. And he wept, remembering Gorvenal, his father, and the land of Lyonesse. Then the distant cry of a hunt, with horse and hound, came suddenly and lifted his heart, and a tall stag broke cover at the forest edge. The pack and the hunt streamed after it with a tumult of cries and winding horns, but just as the hounds were racing clustered at the haunch, The quarry turned to bay at a stone's throw from Tristan. A huntsman gave him the thrust, while all around the hunt had gathered and was winding the kill. But Tristan, seeing by the gesture of the huntsman that he made to cut the neck of the stag, cried out, "My lord, what would you do? Is it fitting to cut up so noble a beast like any farmyard hog? Is that the custom of this country?" And the huntsman answered, "Fair friend, what startles you? Why, yes, first I take off the head of stag, and then I cut it into 4 quarters, and we carry it on our saddle bows to King Mark, our lord. So do we, and so since the days of the first huntsman have done the Cornish man. If, however, you know of some nobler custom, teach it us. Take this knife, and we will learn it willingly." Then Tristan kneeled and skinned the stag before he cut it up, and quartered it all in order, leaving the crow bone all whole, as is meat, and putting aside at the end the head, the haunch, the tongue, and the great heart's vein. And the huntsman and the kennel hinds stood over him with delight, and the master huntsman said, "Friend, these are good ways. In what land learnt you them? Tell us your country and your name." "Good lord, my name is Tristan, and I learnt these ways in my country of Lyonesse." "Tristan," said the master huntsman, "God reward the father that brought you up so nobly. Doubtless he is a baron, rich and strong." Now Tristan knew both speech and silence, and he answered, "No, lord, my father is a burgess. I left his home unbeknownst upon a ship that trafficked to a far place, for I wished to learn how men lived in foreign lands. But if you will accept me of the hunt, I will follow you gladly, and teach you other crafts of venery. Fair Tristan, I marvel there should be a land where a burgess's son can know what a knight's son knows not elsewhere. But come with us since you will it, and welcome, we will bring you to King Mark, our lord." Tristan completed his task. To the dogs he gave the heart, the head, offal, and ears, and he taught the hunt how the skinning and the ordering should be done. Then he thrust the pieces upon pikes, and gave them to this huntsman, and to that to carry, to one the snout, to another the haunch, to another the flank, to another the chine. And he taught them how to ride by twos and rank, according to the dignity of the pieces each might bear. So they took the road and spoke together, till they came on a great castle, and round it fields and orchards, and living waters and fish ponds and plough lands, and many ships were in its haven, for that castle stood above the sea. It was well fenced against all assault or engines of war, and its keep, which the giants had built long ago, was compact of great stones, like a chessboard of vert and azure. And when Tristan asked its name, "Good liege," they said, "we call it Tintagel." And Tristan cried, "Tintagel, blessed be thou of God, and blessed be they that dwell within thee." Therein, my lords, therein had Rivalen taken Blanchefleur to wife, though their son knew it not. When they came before the keep, the horns brought the barons to the gates, and King Mark himself. And when the master huntsman had told him all the story, and King Mark had marveled at the good order of the cavalcade, and the cutting of the stag, and the high art of venery and all, yet most he wondered at the stranger boy, and still gazed at him, troubled and wondering whence came his tenderness, and his heart would answer him nothing. But, my lords, it was blood that spoke, and the love he had long since borne his sister Blanchefleur. That evening, when the boards were cleared, a singer out of Wales, a master, came forward among the barons in hall, and sang a harper's song. And as this harper touched the strings of his harp, Tristan, who sat at the king's feet, spoke thus to him, "O master, that is the first of songs. The Bretons of old wove at once to chant the loves of Greyland. And the melody is rare, and rare are the words. Master, your voice is subtle. Harp us that well." But when the Welshman had sung, he answered, "Boy, what do you know of the craft of music? If the burgesses of Lyonesse teach their sons harp, play also, and rotes and viols too. Rise, and take this harp, and show your skill." Then Tristan took the harp and sang so well that the barons softened as they heard, and King Mark marveled at the harper from Lyonesse, whither so long ago Rivalen had taken Blanchefleur away. When the song ended, the king was silent a long space, but he said at last, "Son, blessed be the master that taught thee, and blessed be thou of God, for God loves good singers. Their voices and the voice of the harp enter the souls of men, and wake dear memories, and caused them to forget many a mourning and many a sin. For our joy did you come to this roof. Stay near us a long time, friend. And Tristan answered, Very willingly will I serve you, sire, as your harper, your huntsman, and your liege. So did he, and for 3 years a mutual love grew up in their hearts. By day Tristan followed King Mark at pleas and in saddle. By night he slept in the royal room with the counselors and the peers, and if the king was sad he would harp to him to soothe his care. The barons also cherished him, and as you shall learn, Dinas of Leiden, the seneschal, beyond all others, and more tenderly than the barons, and then Dinas the king loved him. But Tristan could not forget, or Morholt his father, or his master Gorvenal, or the land of Lyonesse. My lords, a teller that would please should not stretch his tale too long, and truly this tale is so various and so high that it needs no straining. Then let me shortly tell how Morholt himself, after long wandering by sea and land, came into Cornwall and found Tristan, and showing the king the carbuncle that once was Blanchefleur's, said, King Mark, here is your nephew Tristan, son of your sister Blanchefleur, and of King Rivalen. Duke Morgan holds his land most wrongfully. It is time such land came back to its lord. And Tristan, in a word, when his uncle had armed him knight, crossed the sea, and was hailed of his father's vassals, and killed Rivalen's slayer, and was re-seized of his land. Then remembering how King Mark could no longer live in joy without him, he summoned his council and his barons and said this, Lords of the Lyonesse, I have retaken this place, and I have avenged King Rivalen by the help of God and of you. But 2 men, Morholt and King Mark of Cornwall, nourished me, an orphan and a wandering boy. So should I call them also fathers? Now a free man has 2 things thoroughly his own, his body and his land. To Morholt then, here I will release my land. Do you hold it, father, and your son shall hold it after you. But my body I give up to King Mark. I will leave this country, dear though it be, and in Cornwall I will serve King Mark as my lord. Such is my judgment. But you, my lords of Lyonesse, are my lieges, and owe me counsel. If then some one of you will counsel me another thing, let him rise and speak. But all the barons praised him, though they wept, and taking with him Gorvenal only, Tristan set sail for King Mark's land, the Morholt out of Ireland. When Tristan came back to that land, King Mark and all his barony were mourning, for the King of Ireland had manned a fleet to ravage Cornwall should King Mark refuse, as he had refused these 15 years, to pay a tribute his fathers had paid. Now that year this king had sent to Tintagel to carry his summons, a giant knight, the Morholt, whose sister he had wed, and whom no man had yet been able to overcome. So King Mark had summoned all the barons of his land to council, by letters sealed. On the day assigned, when the barons were gathered in hall, and when the king had taken his throne, the Morholts said these things, King Mark, hear for the last time the summons of the King of Ireland, my lord. He arraigns you to pay at last that which you have owed so long. And because you have refused it too long already, he bids you give over to me this day 300 youths and 300 maidens drawn by lot from among the Cornish folk. But if so be that any would prove by trial of combat that the King of Ireland receives this tribute without right, I will take up his wager. Which among you, my Cornish lords, will fight to redeem this land? The barons glanced at each other, but all were silent. Then Tristan knelt at the feet of King Mark and said, Lord King, by your leave, I will do battle. And in vain would King Mark have turned him from his purpose, thinking, how could even valor save so young a knight? But he threw down his gage to the Morholt, and the Morholt took up the gage. On the appointed day, he had himself clad for a great feat of arms in a hauberk and in a steel helm. And he entered a boat and drew to the islet of St. Samson's, where the knights were to fight each to each alone. Now the Morholt had hoisted to his mast a sail of rich purple, and coming fast to land, he moored his boat on the shore. But Tristan pushed off his own boat adrift with his feet, and said, One of us only will go hence alive. One boat will serve. And each rousing the other to the fray, they passed into the isle. No man saw the sharp combat, but thrice the salt sea breeze had wafted or seemed to waft a cry of fury to the land. When at last, towards the hour of noon, the purple sail showed far off, the Irish boat appeared from the island shore, and there rose a clamor of the Morholt. When suddenly, as the boat grew larger on the sight and topped a wave, they saw that Tristan stood on the prow holding a sword in his hand. He leapt ashore, and as the mothers kissed the steel upon his feet, he cried to the Morholt's men, "My lords of Ireland, the Morholt fought well. See here, my sword is broken, and a splinter of it stands fast in his head. Take you that steel, my lords. It is the tribute of Cornwall." Then he went up to Tintagel, and as he went the people he had freed waved green boughs, and rich cloths were hung at the windows. But when Tristan reached the castle with joy, songs and joy bells sounding about him, he drooped in the arms of King Mark, for the blood ran from his wounds. The Morholt's men, they landed in Ireland quite cast down. For whenever he came back into Whitehaven, the Morholt had been wont to take joy in the sight of his clan upon the shore, of the queen his sister, and of his niece Isolde the Fair. Tenderly had they cherished him of old, and had he taken some wound, they healed him, for they were skilled in balms and potions. But now their magic was vain, for he lay dead, and the splinter of the foreign brand yet stood in his skull till Iseult plucked it out and shut it in a chest. From that day, Iseult the Fair knew and hated the name of Tristan of Lyonesse. But over in Tintagel Tristan languished, for there trickled a poisonous blood from his wound. The doctors found that the Morholt had thrust into him a poisoned barb, and as their potions and their theriac could never heal him, they left him in God's hands. So hateful a stench came from his wound that all his dearest friends fled him, all save King Mark, Gorvenal, and Dinas of Leyden. They always could stay near his couch because their love overcame their abhorrence. At last Tristan had himself carried into a boat apart on the shore, and lying facing the sea he awaited death, for he thought, "I must die, but it is good to see the sun, and my heart is still high. I would like to try the sea that brings all chances. I would have the sea bear me far off alone, to what land no matter, so that it heal me of my wound." He begged so long that King Mark accepted his desire. He bore him into a boat with neither sail nor oar, and Tristan wished that his harp only should be placed beside him. For sails he could not lift, nor ply, nor sword wield. And as a seaman on some long voyage cast to the sea a beloved companion dead, so Gorvenal pushed out to see that boat where his dear son lay, and the sea drew him away. For 7 days and 7 nights the sea so drew him. At times to charm his grief, he harped. And when at last the sea brought him near a shore where fishermen had left their port that night to fish far out, they heard as they rowed a sweet and strong and living tune that ran above the sea, and feathering their oars they listened immovable. In the first whiteness of the dawn they saw the boat at large. She went at random, and nothing seemed to live in her except the voice of the harp. But as they neared, the air grew weaker and died. And when they hailed her, Tristan's hands had fallen lifeless on the strings, though they still trembled. The fishermen took him in and bore him back to port, to their lady who was merciful and perhaps would heal him. It was that same port of Whitehaven where the Morholt lay, and their lady was Isolde the Fair. She alone, being skilled in philters, could save Tristan, but she alone wished him dead. When Tristan knew himself again, for her art restored him, he knew himself to be in a land of peril, but he was yet strong to hold his own and found good crafty words. He told a tale of how he was a seer that had taken passage on a merchant ship and sailed to Spain to learn the art of reading all the stars, of how pirates had boarded the ship, and of how, though wounded, he had fled into that boat. He was believed, nor did any of the Morholt's men know his face again, so hardly had the poison used it. But when, after 40 days, Iseult of the golden hair had all but healed him, when already his limbs had recovered and the grace of youth returned, he knew that he must escape, and he fled, and after many dangers he came again before Mark the king. The quest of the lady with the hair of gold. My lords, there were in the court of King Mark 4 barons, the basest of men, who hated Tristan with a hard hate, for his greatness and for the tender love the king bore him. And while I know their names, Enret, Ginelin, Gondoin, and Denolan, They knew that the king had intent to grow old childless and to leave his land to Tristan. And their envy swelled, and by lies they angered the chief men of Cornwall against Tristan. They said, "There have been too many marvels in this man's life. It was marvel enough that he beat the Morholt, but by what sorcery did he try the sea alone at the point of death? Or which of us, my lords, could voyage without mast or sail? They say that warlocks can. It was sure a warlock feat, and that is a warlock harp of his pours poisoned daily into the king's heart. See how he has bent that heart by power and chain of sorcery. He will be king yet, my lords, and you will hold your lands of a wizard." They brought over the greater part of the barons, and these pressed King Mark to take to wife some king's daughter who should give him an heir, or else they threatened to return each man into his keep and wage a war. But the king turned against them and swore in his heart that so long as his dear nephew lived, no king's daughter should come to his bed. Then in his turn did Tristan, in his shame to be thought to serve for hire, threaten that if the king did not yield to his barons, he would himself go overseas serve some great king. At this, King Mark made a term with his barons and gave them 40 days to hear his decision. On the appointed day he waited alone in his chamber and sadly mused, "Where shall I find a king's daughter so fair and yet so distant that I may feign to wish her my wife?" Just then by his window that looked upon the sea, 2 building swallows came in quarreling together. Then, startled, they flew out, but had let fall from their beaks a woman's hair, long and fine, and shining like a beam of light. King Mark took it, and called his barons and Tristan, and said, "To please you, lords, I will take a wife, but you must seek her whom I have chosen." "Fair lord, we wish it all," they said. "And who may she be?" "Why," said he, "she whose hair this is, nor will I take another." "And whence, Lord King, comes this hair of gold? Who brought it, and from what land?" "It comes, my lords, from the lady with the hair of gold. The swallows brought it me. They know from what country it came." Then the barons saw themselves mocked and cheated, and they turned with sneers to Tristan, for they thought him to have counseled the trick. But Tristan, when he had looked on the hair of gold, remembered Isolde the Fair and smiled, and said this, "King Mark, can you not see that the doubts of these lords shame me? You have designed in vain. I will go seek the lady with the hair of gold. The search is perilous. Nevertheless, my uncle, I would once more put my body and my life in peril for you, and that your barons may know I love you loyally. I take this oath to die on the adventure or to bring back to this castle of Tintagel the queen with that fair hair." He fitted out a great ship and loaded it with corn and wine, with honey and all manner of good things. He manned it with Gorvenal and 100 young knights of high birth, chosen among the bravest, and he clothed them in coats of homespun and in hair cloth, so that they seemed merchants only. But under the deck he hid rich cloth of gold and scarlet, as for a great king's messengers. When the ship had taken the sea, the helmsman asked him, "Lord, to what land shall I steer?" "Sir," said he, "steer for Ireland, straight for Whitehaven harbor." At first Tristan made believe to the men of Whitehaven that his friends were merchants of England come peacefully to barter. But as these strange merchants passed the day in the useless games of draughts and chess, and seemed to know dice better than the bargain price of corn, Tristan feared discovery and knew not how to pursue his quest. Now it chanced once upon the break of day that he heard a cry so terrible that one would have called it a demon's cry. Nor had he ever heard a brute bellow in such wise, so awful and strange it seemed. He called a woman who passed by the harbor, and said, "Tell me, lady, whence comes that voice I have heard, and hide me nothing." "My lord," said she, "I will tell you truly. It is the roar of a dragon, the most terrible and dauntless upon earth. Daily it leaves its den and stands at one of the gates of the city. Nor can any come out or go in till a maiden has been given up to it, and when it has her in its claws it devours her." "Lady," said Tristan, "make no mock of me, but tell me straight. Can a man born of woman kill this thing?" "Fair sir and gentle," she said, "I cannot say. But this is sure, 20 knights and tried have run the venture, because the King of Ireland has published it that he will give his daughter, Isolde the Fair, to whomsoever shall kill the beast, but it has devoured them all." Tristan left the woman and returning to his ship armed himself in secret. It was a fine sight to see so noble a charger and so good a knight come out from such a merchant hull. But the haven was empty of folk, for the dawn had barely broken, and none saw him as he rode to the gate. And hardly had he passed it, when he met suddenly 5 men at full gallop flying towards the town. Tristan seized one by his hair as he passed, and dragged him over his mount's crupper and held him fast. "God save you, my lord," said he. "And whence does the dragon come?" And when the other had shown him by what road, he let him go. As the monster neared, he showed the head of a bear and red eyes like coals of fire and hairy, tufted ears, lion's claws, a serpent's tail, and a griffin's body. Tristan charged his horse at him so strongly that, though the beast's mane stood with fright, yet he drove at the dragon. His lance struck its scales and shivered. Then Tristan drew his sword and struck at the dragon's head, but he did not so much as cut the hide. The beast felt the blow. With its claws he dragged at the shield and broke it from the arm. Then, his breast unshielded, Tristan used the sword again and struck so strongly that the air rang all round about. But in vain, for he could not wound, and meanwhile the dragon vomited from his nostrils 2 streams of loathsome flames, and Tristan's helm blackened like a cinder, and his horse stumbled and fell down and died. But Tristan, standing on his feet, thrust his sword right into the beast's jaws, and split its heart in 2. Then he cut out the tongue and put it into his hose. But as the poison came against his flesh, the hero fainted and fell in the high grass that bordered the marsh around. Now the man he had stopped in flight was the Seneschal of Ireland, and he desired Isolde the Fair. And though he was a coward, he had dared so far as to return with his companions secretly, and he found the dragon dead. So he cut off its head and bore it to the king, and claimed the great reward. The king could credit his prowess, but hardly, yet wished justice done, and summoned his vassals to court, so that there, before the barony assembled, the seneschal should furnish proof of his victory won. When Isolde the Fair heard that she was to be given to this coward, first she laughed long, and then she wailed. But on the morrow, doubting some trick, she took with her Pyrenes her squire and Brangian her maid, and all 3 rode unbeknownst towards the dragon's lair. And Iseult saw such a trail on the road as made her wonder, for the hoofs that made it had never been shod in her land. Then she came on the dragon, headless, and a dead horse beside him, nor was the horse harnessed in the fashion of Ireland. Some foreign man had slain the beast, but they knew not whether he still lived or no. They sought him long, Iseult and Pyrenes and Brangian together, till at last Brangian saw the helm glittering in the marshy grass, and Tristan still breathed. Pyrenes put him on his horse and bore him secretly to the women's rooms. There Iseult told her mother the tale and left the hero with her, and as the queen unharnessed him, the dragon's tongue fell from his boot of steel. Then the Queen of Ireland revived him by the virtue of an herb and said, "Stranger, I know you for the true slayer of the dragon, but our seneschal, a felon, cut off its head and claims my daughter Iseult for his wage. Will you be ready 2 days hence to give him the lie in battle?" "Queen," said he, "the time is short, but you, I think, can cure me in 2 days. Upon the dragon I conquered Iseult, and on the seneschal perhaps I shall reconquer her." Then the queen brewed him strong brews, and on the morrow Isolde the Fair got him ready a bath and anointed him with a balm her mother had conjured. And as he looked at her he thought, "So I have found the queen of the hair of gold." And he smiled as he thought it. But Iseult, noting it, thought, "Why does he smile, or what have I neglected of the things due to a guest? He smiles to think I have forgotten to burnish his armor." She went and drew the sword from its rich sheath, but when she saw the splinter gone and the gap in the edge, she thought of the Morholt's head. She balanced a moment in doubt. Then she went to where she kept the steel she had found in the skull, and she put it to the sword, and it fitted so that the join was hardly seen. She ran to where Tristan lay wounded, and with the sword above him she cried, "You are that Tristan of the Lioness, who killed the Morholt, my mother's brother, and now you shall die in your turn." Tristan strained to ward the blow, but he was too weak. His wit, however, stood firm in spite of evil, and he said, "So be it. Let me die. But to save yourself long memories, listen a while. King's daughter, my life is not only in your power, but is yours of right. My life is yours because you have twice returned it me. Once, long ago, for I was the wounded harper whom you healed of the poison of the Morholt shaft. Nor repent the healing. Were not these wounds had in fair fight? Did I kill the Morholt by treason? Had he not defied me? And was I not held to the defense of my body? And now the second time also you have saved me. It was for you I fought the beast. But let us leave these things. I would but show you how my life is your own. Then if you kill me of right for the glory of it, you may ponder for long years, praising yourself that you killed a wounded guest who had wagered his life in your gaining. Iseult replied, I hear strange words. Why should he that killed the Morholt seek me also, his niece? Doubtless because the Morholt came for a tribute of maidens from Cornwall. So you came to boast returning that you had brought back the maiden who was nearest to him, to Cornwall, a slave. King's daughter, said Tristan, no. One day 2 swallows flew, and flew to Tintagel, and bore 1 hair out of all your hairs of gold. And I thought they brought me goodwill and peace, so I came to find you overseas. See here, amid the threads of gold upon my coat your hair is sewn. The threads are tarnished, but your bright hair still shines. Iseult put down the sword, and taking up the coat of arms, she saw upon it the hair of gold, and was silent a long space, till she kissed him on the lips to prove peace, and she put rich garments over him. On the day of the barons' assembly, Tristan sent Perines privily to his ship to summon his companions that they should come to court adorned, as befitted the envoys of a great king. One by one the 100 knights passed into the hall where all the barons of Ireland stood. They entered in silence, and sat all in rank together. On their scarlet and purple the gems gleamed. When the king had taken his throne, the seneschal arose to prove by witness and by arms that he had slain the dragon, and that so Iseult was won. Then Iseult bowed to her father and said, King, I have here a man who challenges your seneschal for lies and felony. Promise that you will pardon this man all his past deeds, who stands to prove that he and none other slew the dragon, and grant him forgiveness and your peace. The king said, I grant it. But Iseult said, Father, first give me the kiss of peace and forgiveness, as a sign that you will give him the same. Then she found Tristan and led him before the barony. And as he came, the 100 knights rose all together, and crossed their arms upon their breasts and bowed. So the Irish knew that he was their lord. But among the Irish many knew him again, and cried, Tristan of Lyonesse that slew the Morholt. They drew their swords and clamored for death. But Iseult cried, King, kiss this man upon the lips as your oath was. And the king kissed him, and the clamor fell. Then Tristan showed the dragon's tongue and offered the seneschal battle. But the seneschal looked at his face and dared not. Then Tristan said, My lords, you have said it, and it is truth. I killed the Morholt. But I crossed the sea to offer you a good blood fine, to ransom that deed and get me quit of it. I put my body in peril of death and rid you of the beast, and have so conquered Isolde the Fair, and having conquered her, I will bear her away on my ship. But that these lands of Cornwall and Ireland may know no more hatred, but love only, learn that King Mark, my lord, will marry her. Here stand 100 knights of high name, who all will swear with an oath upon the relics of the holy saints, that King Mark sends you by their embassy offer of peace and of brotherhood and goodwill, and that he would by your courtesy hold Iseult as his honored wife, and that he would have all the men of Cornwall serve her as their queen. When the lords of Ireland heard this, they acclaimed it, and the king also was content. Then, since that treaty and alliance was to be made, the king her father took Iseult by the hand, and asked of Tristan that he should take an oath, to wit that he would lead her loyally to his lord, and Tristan took that oath and swore it before the knights and the barony of Ireland assembled. Then the king put Iseult's right hand into Tristan's right hand, and Tristan held it for a space in token of season for the king of Cornwall. So, for the love of King Mark, did Tristan conquer the queen of the hair of gold. The philter. When the day of Iseult's livery to the lords of Cornwall drew near, her mother gathered herbs and flowers and roots, and steeped them in wine, and brewed a potion of might. And having done so, set apart to Brangian. Child, it is yours to go with Iseult to King Mark's country, for you love her with a faithful love. Take then this pitcher, and remember well my words. Hide it so that no eye shall see, nor no lip go near it. But when the wedding night has come, in that moment in which the wedded are left alone, pour this essenced wine into a cup, and offer it to King Mark and to Iseult his queen. Oh, take all care, my child, that they alone shall taste this brew. For this is its power. They who drink of it together love each other with their every single sense, and with their every thought, forever, in life and in death. And Brangian promised the queen that she would do her bidding. On the bark that bore her to Tintagel, Isolde the Fair was weeping as she remembered her own land, and mourning swelled her heart, and she said, "Who am I that I should leave you to follow unknown men, my mother and my land? Accursed be the sea that bears me, for rather would I lie dead on the earth where I was born than live out there, beyond." One day, when the wind had fallen and the sails hung slack, Tristan dropped anchor by an island, and the 100 knights of Cornwall and the sailors, weary of the sea, landed all. Isolde alone remained aboard, and a little serving maid, when Tristan came near the queen to calm her sorrow. The sun was hot above them, and they were athirst, and, as they called, the little maid looked about for drink for them, and found that pitcher which the mother of Isolde had given into Brangian's keeping. And when she came on it, the child cried, "I have found you wine." Now she had found not wine, but passion and joy most sharp, and anguish without end, and death. The queen drank deep of that draught, and gave it to Tristan, and he drank also long, and emptied it all. Brangian came in upon them. She saw them gazing at each other in silence, as though ravished and apart. She saw before them the pitcher standing there. She snatched it up and cast it into the shuddering sea and cried aloud, "Cursed be the day I was born, and cursed the day that first I trod this deck. Iseult, my friend, and Tristan, you have drunk death together." And once more the bark ran free for Tintagel. But it seemed to Tristan as though an ardent briar, sharp-thorned, but with flower most sweet-smelling, drave roots into his blood, and laced the lovely body of Iseult all round about it, and bound it to his own, and to his every thought and desire. And he thought, "Felons, that charged me with coveting King Mark's land, I have come lower by far, for it is not his land I covet. Fair uncle, who loved me orphaned ere ever you knew in me the blood of your sister Blanchefleur, you that wept as you bore me to that boat alone, why did you not drive out the boy that was to betray you? What thought was that? Isolde is yours and I am but your vassal. Isolde is yours and I am your son. Isolde is yours and may not love me." But Isolde loved him, though she would have hated. She could not hate, for a tenderness more sharp than hatred tore her. And Brangian watched them in anguish, suffering more cruelly because she alone knew the depth of evil done. 2 days she watched them, seeing them refuse all food or comfort, and seeking each other as blind men seek, wretched apart, and together more wretched still, for then they trembled each for the first avowal. On the 3rd day, as Tristan neared the tent on deck where Isolde sat, she saw him coming, and she said to him, very humbly, "Come in, my lord." "Queen," said Tristan, "why do you call me lord? Am I not your liege and vassal, to revere and serve and cherish you as my lady and queen?" But Isolde answered, "No, you know that you are my lord and my master, and I your slave." Why did I not sharpen those wounds of the wounded singer, or let die that dragon slayer in the grasses of the marsh? But then I did not know what now I know. And what is it that you know, Iseult? She laid her arm upon Tristan's shoulder. The light of her eyes was drowned, and her lips trembled. "The love of you," she said. Where did he put his lips to hers? But as they thus tasted their first joy, Brangian, that watched them, stretched her arms and cried at their feet in tears, "Stay and return if still you can." But oh, that path has no returning. For already love and his strength drag you on, and now, henceforth, forever, never shall you know joy without pain again. The wine possesses you, the draught your mother gave me, the draught the king alone should have drunk with you. But that old enemy has tricked us, all us three. Friend Tristan, Iseult my friend, for that bad ward I kept take here my body and my life, for through me and in that cup you have drunk not love alone, but love and death together. The lovers held each other. Life and desire trembled through their youth, and Tristan said, well then, come death. And as evening fell upon the bark that healed and ran to King Mark's land, they gave themselves up utterly to love. The tall pine tree. As King Mark came down to greet Iseult upon the shore, Tristan took her hand and led her to the king, and the king took seizin of her, taking her hand. He led her in great pomp to his castle of Tintagel. And as she came in hall amid the vassals, her beauty shone, so that the walls were lit as they are lit at dawn. Then King Mark blessed those swallows which, by happy courtesy, had brought the hair of gold, and Tristan also he blessed, and the 100 knights who, on that adventurous bark, had gone to find him joy of heart and of eyes. Yet to him also that ship was to bring sting, torment, and mourning. And on the 18th day, having called his barony together, he took Iseult to wife. But on the wedding night, to save her friend, Brangian took her place in the darkness, for her remorse demanded even this from her. Nor was the trick discovered. Then Iseult lived as a queen, but lived in sadness. She had King Mark's tenderness and the baron's honor. The people also loved her. She passed her days amid the frescoes on the walls and floors all strewn with flowers. Good jewels had she, and purple cloth and tapestry of Hungary, and Thessaly too, and songs of harpers, and curtains upon which were worked leopards and eagles and popinjays and all the beasts of sea and field. And her love too she had, love high and splendid, for as is the custom among great lords, Tristan could ever be near her, at his leisure and his dalliance, night and day. For he slept in the king's chamber, as great lords do, among the lieges and the counselors. Yet still she feared, for though her love were secret and Tristan unsuspected, for who suspects a son? Brangian knew, and Brangian seemed in the queen's mind like a witness spying, for Brangian alone knew what manner of life she led, and held her at mercy so. And the queen thought, if some day she should weary of serving as a slave the bed where once she passed for queen, if Tristan should die from her betrayal, so fear maddened the queen, but not in truth the fear of Brangian who was loyal. Her own heart bred the fear. Not Brangian who was faithful, not Brangian, but themselves had these lovers to fear, for hearts so stricken will lose their vigilance. Love pressed them hard, as thirst presses the dying stag to the stream. Love dropped upon them from high heaven, as a hawk slipped after long hunger falls right upon the bird. And love will not be hidden. Brangian, indeed, by her prudence, saved them well, nor ever were the queen and her lover unguarded. But in every hour and place, every man could see love terrible that rode them, and could see in these lovers their every sense overflowing like new wine working in the vat. The 4 felons at court who had hated Tristan of old for his prowess watched the queen. They had guessed that great love, and they burnt with envy and hatred and now a kind of evil joy. They planned to give news of their watching to the king, to see his tenderness turn to fury, Tristan thrust out or slain, and the queen in torment. For though they feared Tristan, their hatred mastered their fear. And on a day, the 4 barons called King Mark to parley, and Anret said, Fair king, your heart will be troubled, and we 4 also mourn. Yet are we bound to tell you what we know. You have placed your trust in Tristan, and Tristan would shame you. In vain we warned you. For the love of one man, you have mocked ties of blood and all your barony. Learn then that Tristan loves the queen. It is truth proved, and many a word is passing on it now. The royal king shrank and answered, Coward, what thought was that? Indeed, I have placed my trust in Tristan. And rightly, for on the day when the Morholt offered combat to you all, you hung your heads and were dumb, and you trembled before him. But Tristan dared him for the honor of this land, and took mortal wounds. Therefore do you hate him, and therefore do I cherish him beyond thee, and Rhett, and beyond any other. But what then have you seen, or heard, or known? Not, Lord, save what your eyes could see or your ears hear. Look you and listen, sire, if there is yet time." And they left him to taste the poison. Then King Mark watched the queen and Tristan. But Brangian, noting it, warned them both, and the king watched in vain, so that, soon wearying of an ignoble task, but knowing, alas, that he could not kill his uneasy thought, he sent for Tristan and said, "Tristan, leave this castle, and having left it, remain apart and do not think to return to it, and do not repass its moat or boundaries. Felons have charged you with an awful treason, but ask me nothing. I could not speak their words without shame to us both, and for your part seek you no word to appease. I have not believed them, had I done so, but their evil words have troubled all my soul, and only by your absence can my disquiet be soothed. Go, doubtless I will soon recall you. Go, my son, you are still dear to me." When the felons heard the news, they said among themselves, "He is gone. The wizard, he is driven out. Surely he will cross the sea on far adventures, to carry his traitor service to some distant king." But Tristan had not strength to depart altogether, and when he had crossed the moats and boundaries of the castle, he knew he could go no further. He stayed in Tintagel town and lodged with Gorvenal in a burgess house, and languished more wounded than when in that past day the shaft of the Morholt had tainted his body. In the close towers Isolde the Fair drooped also, but more wretched still. For it was hers all day long to feign laughter, and all night long to conquer fever and despair. And all night as she lay by King Mark's side, fever still kept her waking, and she stared at darkness. She longed to fly to Tristan, and she dreamt dreams of running to the gates, and of finding their sharp scythes, traps of the felons, that cut her tender knees. And she dreamt of weakness and falling, and that her wounds had left her blood upon the ground. Now these lovers would have died, but Brangian succored them. At peril of her life, she found the house where Tristan lay. There Gorvenal opened to her very gladly, knowing what salvation she could bring. So she found Tristan, and to save the lovers, she taught him a device, nor was ever known a more subtle ruse of love. Behind the castle of Tintagel was an orchard fenced around and wide, and all closed in with stout and pointed stakes, and numberless trees were there and fruit on them, birds and clusters of sweet grapes. And furthest from the castle, by the stakes of the palisade, was a tall pine tree, straight and with heavy branches spreading from its trunk. At its root a living spring welled calm into a marble round, then ran between two borders winding throughout the orchard, and so on, till it flowed at last within the castle and through the women's rooms. And every evening, by Brangian's counsel, Tristan cut him twigs and bark, leapt the sharp stakes, and having come beneath the pine, threw them into the clear spring. They floated light as foam down the stream to the women's rooms, and Iseult watched for their coming, and on those evenings she would wander out into the orchard and find her friend. Lithe and in fear would she come, watching at every step for what might lurk in the trees, observing foes or the felons whom she knew, till she spied Tristan, and the night and the branches of the pine protected them. And so she said one night, "Oh, Tristan, I have heard that the castle is fairy, and that twice a year it vanishes away. So is it vanished now, and this is that enchanted orchard of which the harpers sing." And as she said it, the sentinels bugled dawn. Iseult had re-found her joy. Mark's thought of ill ease grew faint, but the felons felt or knew which way lay truth, and they guessed that Tristan had met the queen. Till at last Duke Inret, whom God shame, said to his peers, "My lords, let us take counsel of Frosin the dwarf, for he knows the 7 arts and magic and every kind of charm. He will teach us, if he will, the wiles of Isolde the Fair." The little evil man drew signs for them and characters of sorcery. He cast the fortunes of the hour, and then at last he said, "Sirs, high good lords, this night shall you seize them both." Then they led the little wizard to the king, and he said, "Sire, bid your huntsmen leash the hounds and saddle the horses. Proclaim a 7 days' hunt in the forest and 7 nights abroad therein, and hang me high if you do not hear this night what converse Tristan holds." So did the king unwillingly, and at fall of night he left the hunt, taking the dwarf in pillion, and entered the orchard, and the dwarf took him to the tall pine tree, saying, Fair king, climb into these branches and take with you your arrows and your bow, for you may need them, and bide you still. That night the moon shone clear. Hidden in the branches, the king saw his nephew leap the palisades and throw his bark and twigs into the stream. But Tristan had bent over the round well to throw them, and so doing had seen the image of the king. He could not stop the branches as they floated away, and there, yonder, in the women's rooms, Iseult was watching and would come. She came, and Tristan watched her motionless. Above him in the tree, he heard the click of the arrow when it fits the string. She came, but with more prudence than her wont, thinking, "What has passed, that Tristan does not come to meet me? He has seen some foe." Suddenly, by the clear moonshine, she also saw the king's shadow in the fount. She showed the wit of women well. She did not lift her eyes. "Lord God," she said, low down, "grant I may be the first to speak." "Tristan," she said, "what have you dared to do, calling me hither at such an hour? Often have you called me. To beseech, you said, and queen though I am, I know you won me that title, and I have come. What would you? Queen, I would have you pray the king for me." She was in tears and trembling, but Tristan praised God the Lord who had shown his friend her peril. "Queen," he went on, "often and in vain have I summoned you. Never would you come. Take pity. The king hates me, and I know not why. Perhaps you know the cause and can charm his anger. For whom can he trust if not you? Chaste queen and courteous Iseult. Truly, Lord Tristan, you do not know he doubts us both. And I, to add to my shame, must acquaint you of it. But God knows if I lie, never went cut my love to any man, but he that first received me. And would you have me, at such a time, implore your pardon of the king? Why, did he know of my passage here tonight, he would cast my ashes to the wind. My body trembles, and I am afraid. I go, for I have waited too long." In the branches the king smiled and had pity. And as Iseult fled, "Queen," said Tristan, "in the Lord's name help me, for charity." "Friend," she replied, "God aid you. The king wrongs you, but the Lord God will be by you in whatever land you go." So she went back to the women's rooms and told it to Brangian, who cried, "Iseult, God has worked a miracle for you, for he is compassionate and will not hurt the innocent in heart." And when he had left the orchard, the king said, smiling, "Fair nephew, that ride you planned is over now." But in an open glade apart, Frosin, the dwarf, read in the clear stars that the king now meant his death. He blackened with shame and fear and fled into Wales. The discovery. King Mark made peace with Tristan. Tristan returned to the castle as of old. Tristan slept in the king's chamber with his peers. He could come or go. The king thought no more of it. Mark had pardoned the felons, and, as the seneschal, Dinas of Leiden, found the dwarf wandering in a forest abandoned, he brought him home, and the king had pity and pardoned even him. But his goodness did but feed the ire of the barons, who swore this oath. If the king kept Tristan in the land, they would withdraw to their strongholds as for war, and they called the king to parley. "Lord," said they, "drive you Tristan forth. He loves the queen, as all who choose can see. But as for us, we will bear it no longer." And the king sighed, looking down in silence. "King," they went on, "we will not bear it, for we know now that this is known to you, and that yet you will not move. Parley you, and take counsel. As for us, if you will not exile this man, your nephew, and drive him forth out of your land forever, we will withdraw within our bailiwicks, and take our neighbors also from your court, for we cannot endure his presence longer in this place. Such is your balance. Choose." "My lords," said he, "once I hearkened to the evil words you spoke of Tristan, yet was I wrong in the end. But you are my lieges, and I would not lose the service of my men. Counsel me therefore. I charge you, you that owe me counsel. You know me for a man neither proud nor overstepping." "Lord," said they, "call then Frosin hither. You mistrust him for that orchard night. Still, was it not he that read in the stars of the queens coming there, and to the very pine tree too? He is very wise. Take counsel of him." And he came, did that hunchback of hell. The felons greeted him, and he planned this evil. "Sire," said he, Let your nephew ride hard tomorrow at dawn with a brief drawn up on parchment and well sealed with a seal. Bid him ride to King Arthur at Duel. Sire, he sleeps with the peers in your chamber. Go you out when the first sleep falls on man. And if he love Iseult so madly, why, then I swear by God and by the laws of Rome, he will try to speak with her before he rides. But if he do so unknown to you or to me, then slay me. As for the trap, let me lay it, but do you say nothing of his ride to him until the time for sleep. And when King Mark had agreed, this dwarf did a vile thing. He bought of a baker 4 farthings worth of flour, and hid it in the turn of his coat. That night, when the king had supped and the men-at-arms lay down to sleep in hall, Tristan came to the king as custom was, and the king said, Fair nephew, do my will. Ride tomorrow night to King Arthur at Duel, and give him this brief, with my greeting, that he may open it, and stay you with him but one day. And when Tristan said, I will take it on the morrow, the king added, Aye, and before day dawn. But, as the peers slept all round the king their lord, that night, a mad thought took Tristan that, before he rode, he knew not for how long, before dawn he would say a last word to the queen. And there was a spear length in the darkness between them. Now the dwarf slept with the rest in the king's chamber. And when he thought that all slept, he rose and scattered the flour silently in the spear length that lay between Tristan and the queen. But Tristan watched and saw him, and said to himself, It is to mark my footsteps, but there shall be no marks to show. At midnight, when all was dark in the room, no candle nor any lamp glimmering, the king went out silently by the door, and with him the dwarf. Then Tristan rose in the darkness, and judged the spear length, and leapt the space between, for his farewell. But that day in the hunt a boar had wounded him in the leg, and in this effort the wound bled. He did not feel it or see it in the darkness, but the blood dripped upon the couches and the flour strewn between. And outside in the moonlight the dwarf read the heavens, and knew what had been done, and he cried, Enter, my king, and if you do not hold them, hang me high. Then the king and the dwarf and the 4 felons ran in with lights and noise, and though Tristan had regained his place, there was the blood for witness, and though Iseult feigned sleep, and Perennes too, who lay at Tristan's feet, yet there was the blood for witness. And the king looked in silence at the blood where it lay upon the bed and the boards, and trampled into the flour. And the 4 barons held Tristan down upon his bed, and mocked the queen also, promising her full justice. And they bared and showed the wound whence the blood flowed. Then the king said, Tristan, now nothing longer holds. Tomorrow you shall die. And Tristan answered, Have mercy, Lord, in the name of God that suffered the cross. But the felons called on the king to take vengeance, saying, Do justice, king, take vengeance. And Tristan went on, Have mercy, not on me, for why should I stand a dying? Truly, but for you I would have sold my honor high to cowards who, under your peace, have put hands on my body. But in homage to you I have yielded, and you may do with me what you will. But, Lord, remember the queen. And as he knelt at the king's feet, he still complained, Remember the queen, for if any man of your household makes so bold as to maintain the lie that I loved her unlawfully, I will stand up armed to him in a ring. Sire, in the name of God the Lord, have mercy on her. Then the barons bound him with ropes, and the queen also. But had Tristan known that trial by combat was to be denied him, certainly he would not have suffered it. For he trusted in God, and knew no man dared draw sword against him in the lists. And truly he did well to trust in God, for though the felons mocked him when he said he had loved loyally, yet I call you to witness, my lords who read this, and who know of the philtre drunk upon the high seas, and who understand whether is love or disloyalty indeed. For men see this and that outward thing, but God alone the heart, and in the heart alone is crime, and the sole final judge is God. Therefore did he lay down the law that a man accused might uphold his cause by battle, and God himself fights for the innocent in such a combat. Therefore did Tristan claim justice and the right of battle, and therefore was he careful to fail in nothing of the homage he owed King Mark, his lord. But had he known what was coming, he would have killed the felons. The chantry leap. Dark was the night, and the news ran that Tristan and the queen were held, and that the king would kill them. and wealthy burgess or common man, they wept and ran to the palace. And the murmurs and the cries ran through the city. But such was the king's anger in his castle above that not the strongest nor the proudest baron dared move him. Night ended and the day drew near. Mark, before dawn, rode out to the place where he held pleas and judgment. He ordered a ditch to be dug in the earth, and knotty vine shoots and thorns to be laid therein. At the hour of prime, he had a band cried through his land to gather the men of Cornwall. They came with a great noise, and the king spoke them thus: My lords, I have made here a faggot of thorns for Tristan and the queen, for they have fallen. But they cried all with tears, A sentence, Lord, a sentence, an indictment and pleas. For killing without trial is shame and crime. But Mark answered in his anger, Neither respite, nor delay, nor pleas, nor sentence. By God that made the world, if any dare petition me, he shall burn first. He ordered the fire to be lit, and Tristan to be called. The flames rose, and all were silent before the flames, and the king waited. The servants ran to the room where watch was kept on the two lovers, and they dragged Tristan out by his hands, though he wept for his honor. But as they dragged him off in such a shame, the queen still called to him, Friend, if I die that you may live, that will be great joy. Now hear how full of pity is God, and how he heard the lament and the prayers of the common folk that day. For as Tristan and his guards went down from the town to where the faggot burned, near the road upon a rock was a chantry. It stood at a cliff's edge, steep and sheer, and it turned to the sea breeze. In the apse of it were windows glazed. Then Tristan said to those with him, My lords, let me enter this chantry, to pray for a moment the mercy of God whom I have offended. My death is near. There is but one door to the place, my lords, and each of you has his sword drawn. So you may well see that when my prayer to God is done, I must come past you again, when I have prayed God, my lords, for the last time. And when the guard said, Why? Let him go in. So they let him enter to pray. But he, once in, dashed through and leapt the altar rail, and the altar too, and forced a window of the apse, and leapt again over the cliff's edge. So might he die, but not of that shameful death before the people. Now learn, my lords, how generous was God to him that day. The wind took Tristan's cloak, and he fell upon a smooth rock at the cliff's foot, which to this day the men of Cornwall call Tristan's Leap. His guards still waited for him at the chantry door, but vainly, for God was now his guard. And he ran, and the fine sand crunched under his feet, and far off he saw the faggot burning, and the smoke and the crackling flames, and fled. Sword girt and bridle loose, Gorvenal had fled the city, lest the king burn him in his master's place. And he found Tristan on the shore. Master, said Tristan, God has saved me, but oh, master, to what end? For without Iseult I may not, and I will not live, and I rather had died of my fall. They will burn her for me, then I too will die for her. Lord, said Gorvenal, take no counsel of anger. See here this thicket with a ditch dug round about it. Let us hide therein where the track passes near, and comers by it will tell us news. And, boy, if they burn Iseult, I swear by God, the son of Mary, never to sleep under a roof again until she be avenged. There was a poor man of the common folk that had seen Tristan's fall, and had seen him stumble and rise after. And he crept to Tintagel and to Iseult where she was bound, and said, Queen, weep no more. Your friend is fled safely. Then I thank God, said she, and whether they bind or loose me, and whether they kill or spare me, I care but little now. And though blood came at the cord knots, so tightly had the traitors bound her, yet still she said, smiling, Did I weep for that when God has loosed my friend, I should be little worth. When the news came to the king that Tristan had leapt that leap, and was lost, he paled with anger, and bade his men bring forth Iseult. They dragged her from the room, and she came before the crowd, held by her delicate hands, from which blood dropped, and the crowd called, Have pity on her, the loyal queen and honored. Surely they that gave her up brought mourning on us all. Our curse is on them. But the king's men dragged her to the thorn faggot as it blazed. She stood up before the flame, and the crowd cried its anger and cursed the traitors and the king. None could see her without pity, unless he had a felon's heart. She was so tightly bound. The tears ran down her face and fell upon her gray gown where ran a little thread of gold, and a thread of gold was twined into her hair. Just then there had come up 100 lepers of the king's, deformed and broken, white horribly, and limping on their crutches. And they drew near the flame, and being evil, loved the sight. And their chief Ivan, the ugliest of them all, cried to the king in a quavering voice, "O king, you would burn this woman in that flame, and it is sound justice, but too swift, for very soon the fire will fall, and her ashes will very soon be scattered by the high wind, and her agony be done. Throw her rather to your lepers where she may drag out a life, for ever asking death." And the king answered, "Yes, let her live that life, for it is better justice and more terrible. I can love those that gave me such a thought." And the lepers answered, "Throw her among us, and make her one of us. Never shall lady have known a worse end." And look, they said, at our rags and our abominations. She has had pleasure in rich stuffs and furs, jewels and walls of marble, honor, good wines and joy. But when she sees your lepers always king, and only them forever, their couches and their huts, then indeed she will know the wrong she has done, and bitterly desire even that great flame of thorns. And as the king heard them, he stood a long time without moving. Then he ran to the queen and seized her by the hand, and she cried, "Burn me, rather burn me." But the king gave her up, and Ivan took her, and the 100 lepers pressed around, and to hear her cries all the crowd rose in pity. But Ivan had an evil gladness, and when he dragged her out of the borough bounds with his hideous company. Now they took that road where Tristan lay in hiding, and Gorvenal said to him, "Son, here is your friend. Will you do naught?" Then Tristan mounted the horse and spurred out of the bush, and cried, "Ivan, you have been at the queen's side a moment, and too long. Now leave her if you would live." But Ivan threw his cloak away and shouted, "Your clubs, comrades, and your staves, crutches in the air, for a fight is on." Then it was fine to see the lepers throwing their capes aside and stirring their sick legs and brandishing their crutches, some threatening, groaning all, but to strike them Tristan was too noble. There are singers who sing that Tristan killed Ivan, but it is a lie. Too much a knight was he to kill such things. Gorvenal indeed, snatching up an oak sapling, crashed it on Ivan's head till his blood ran down to his misshapen feet. Then Tristan took the queen. Henceforth near him she felt no further evil. He cut the cords that bound her arms so straitly, and he left the plain so that they plunged into the wood of Morholt. And there in the thick wood Tristan was as sure as in a castle keep. And as the sun fell they halted all three at the foot of a little hill. Fear had wearied the queen, and she leant her head upon his body and slept. But in the morning Gorvenal stole from a woodman his bow and 2 good arrows plumed and barbed, and gave them to Tristan, the great archer, and he shot him a fawn and killed it. Then Gorvenal gathered dry twigs, struck flint, and lit a great fire to cook the venison. And Tristan cut him branches and made a hut and garnished it with leaves. And Iseult slept upon the thick leaves there. So, in the depths of the wild would began for the lovers that savage life, which yet they loved very soon.